particular process for convening and fostering collaborative research interest groups, we can start to pave the way and add to the way. So we're not trying to pretend that, you know, we've got something completely unseen and unheard of, but what we really do want to do is contribute towards, participate in, and bring the community that we are part of into this research process. So pave the way for transformative change within grounded theories and really impactful research emanating out of the African context. We are not wanting to stay with sort of the traditional tertiary education sector or policy-only education space research paradigm, because our feeling and the feeling from the conversations we've had in this group is that there's always a risk when you research on or you filter voices through a number of layers of data capture and somebody else's interpretation, that you actually overlook or dilute the experience of those voices and experiences. So what we're really keen to try and do, and it is experimental, is to cultivate a research ecosystem that really celebrates and amplifies the African perspective, is deeply collaborative, brings real first-hand voice into the experience, and celebrates the lived African perspective and all of its rich potential. Okay, so our goals for today, well, the goals for the research network are to empower African voices, support African education innovation and best practices, really enable and actively facilitate community engagement and a sense of agency and real agency. And then, you know, try and increasingly create these strong research to practice and practice to research feedback loops. We are keen to see if we can champion Afrocentric knowledge generation. As we mentioned, a core feature is this ecosystemic capacity. So really stepping in fact, beyond even collaboration, stepping into co-creation, starting to see if we work together, how much more can we create together than we would ever have been able to create individually. And in fact, that is much more than just the sum of what we each bring. It's generating a very new approach to how we think and work. We're really keen to see if we can do some capacity building. And I think this concept of bringing young researchers, perhaps even students, so we're really keen, Karima, to see if we can evolve the youth researcher capability. So anybody from 13 years onwards that might be keen and interested to participate and to write themselves and to bring their thinking and start to grow that capacity. And then obviously we're keen to disseminate that knowledge, influence policy, and inform the global narrative, as well as facilitate greater levels of international collaboration. Sorry, nearly finished. We just also then wanted to sort of, so that's the grounding of the thinking that's gone into these past sessions around the research network. The opportunity that's arisen for us to develop a book proposal has, as we said, come through quite spontaneously, and it's really exciting to kind of feel an intent that we put out manifesting for us without our needing to actually unduly chase it. And so just a little background, although this is the first formal group Africa Voices dialogue session for the year, we have not been quiet. It's been an extremely busy year for the Africa Voices dialogue kind of coordinating team. And it was kicked off in January when we attended the ICSE conference in Dublin. So ICSE is the International Congress for School Efficacy and Improvement. Andrew is he was a previous board member, and he's also one of the network coordinators for ICSE. And Africa Voices Dialogue was born out of ICSE in 2020. And so while at ICSE, we had a really phenomenal, we won't go into too much detail on it, but we had a really phenomenal time there, extremely good connections with old friends, new friends, great networks. And while we were there, we were approached by the team from Emerald to invite us to submit a book proposal. So Fatim Zara, who you can see in the lower picture, she's on the call today. Fatim Zara and ourselves, we were in conversation with the team at Emerald Publishing around co-crafting and developing a book proposal to bring an African perspective into the book series that they have been running for a number of years now. And that book series is really focused on professional learning networks. So we were asked to submit a proposal for an African perspective on professional learning networks. I'm going to stop speaking after this slide to just have a...
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you again. Well, I am Yamina El-Kirat Al-Allam from Mohammed V University, Rabat, Morocco. We met at XC held in Morocco, and I joined the group since then. And I'm really very interested in joining this research group. Actually, that's a great initiative. You're doing a great job, guys. You're really exceptional leaders for Africa. So I will listen more to the project because I was not sure of the time. So I will listen, and then I can share my ideas too.
Thank you. Yasmin, would you like to introduce yourself?
You mean me, right? Is there another Yasmin? Okay. Hi.
Yes,
So I'm from Toro University, and I actually have I was a president of the Rotary Club of New York, and I had an inquiry in 2017 from Burundi, and they were looking to partner with us. They were looking for computers. And so I answered, and out of this grew a project with Emma that he called Computers for Schools Burundi. And we now have 5 schools of excellence in Burundi. We have 1,200 computers, 350 teachers that we have trained, and more than 8,000 students who have gone through our program. But you know, Emma's big language is French to communicate other than Swahili and Kirundi. He speaks English too, but his grand writing skills for English, you know, perhaps, you know, I was helpful. So we worked on a grant, and that is where this comes in. And we got a grant. We have just received news that we are getting a grant for Burundi, and the grant will be for solar panels and drip irrigation for women in a specific part in Burundi, and then a second village where we are going to try, and with heritage seeds that are working in Burundi that are not linked to linked to a major manufacturer, because you don't want to have we don't want our farmers to be beholden to a colonial sort of system. And then we're trying to do pig farming in another part of Burundi, and we want to compare those two, and we're going to center it around the schools where we already have the computers and the internet, so that the parents, it's mostly focusing on mothers who are the breadwinners, if they can work with their children to create those Excel spreadsheets, so it becomes a more useful implementation of this technology. I mean, it's one thing to teach a kid how to do spreadsheets, and it's quite another when you have a use for all of this knowledge, and then hopefully have a possibility. It's a small grant of like less than 40,000, but you know, Burundi is very poor, so this will hopefully go a far way. And so we are excited to start this endeavor. And that's what I would like to write about. But I don't want to write about it by myself. I want to write about it with Emma. I want to be sort of the person behind him because it needs to have his vision. You know, he's the one on the ground. and he's shepherding everything through. I don't want to be the white face on top of his on top of his baby. And we already talked about it. I said, you know, I want you to, when we did the grant, you know, he had written everything in English, and then I worked on it, and then I thought, why is it all in English? And so I turned back to him and I said, you know, I think we should take some Kirundi and Swahili and put that right into your grant, because those are your languages, and then translate what you want to say. And he was like, we can do that. And I said, yes, you can do anything you want. You're a free man.
Hallelujah, Jasmine. Okay, one chapter down. Fantastic. That's
Yeah.
You like
that is oh yes. Yep. We'll share with you just now. So fantastic. You're not escaping us now. We are looking forward to that chapter. That's precisely the vision. This co-crafted real voice, a little bit of support from surround support, but yeah, just co-create the stories that are real, but so often get stuck because there isn't channeling to help them make it into the next kind of level of visibility. Awesome. Thank you, Jasmine, for inspiring us like that.
Thank you.
I see Dr. Timothy Onserio also joined us. Timothy can say a word of hello, where you're joining us, and your expectation from this session. Timothy is like he has dropped, if I'm not wrong.
He's there.
Timothy. Aha.
Right.
Hi, Timothy. Yes.
Yes, give me 1 second. Okay. I think I'm on now, right?
Yes.
Yes. It's great to see you all here today. And a little earlier where I am at this moment, it's around 8 a.m. You know, trying to get the kids to school. And that kind of reminded me of this meeting. And, you know, I'm glad to be here. You know, and as I said, you know, as much as I started, you know, my career journey as a teacher, you know, I never ended to be one. You know, however, you know, I find in my daily work, you know, that's what I do. I do teaching. That's all I do. You know, however, you know, when I heard about, you know, putting together a book and you know, some other things, especially for, you know, what we do, especially for the education in Africa. You know, I thought about, you know, as a friend of AVD, you will come in and give a different perspective a little bit. You know, in a little background, I just wanted to say that, you know, my name's you know, Dr. Timothy Onserio. You know, I'm based in Washington, D.C. I'm the director of a regulatory review at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. That's where, you know, that's where I do work. You know, I'm a family nurse practitioner trained, and so what that means is that I see patients, you know, on a daily basis. I'm a primary care provider where I am, and I see patients. You know, I talk to people. You know, same like teachers. You know, they also talk to people. You know, on a daily basis. You know, however, you know, my perspective, if there's an addition to this perspective the AVD is having here, is to bring, you know, that perspective from the health perspective and on, you know, how that affects usually, especially, for example, school attendance. You know, there is a lot of, you know, for example, in Africa, there's a lot of communicable diseases. There's a lot of, you know, food, you know, issues and nutrition issues. And, you know, all these kind of brings together, you know, those things which affect, you know, school attendance or, you know, performance in school. You know, I just wanted to see if there's a way we can kind of incorporate the health path into, you know, this great idea which is on the table, and see how that is going to affect, education and the educational outcomes and educational programs. I'm looking forward to learn more from you all. And as I said, my colleague Andrew over there and myself, we were college mates at the University of Nairobi, and me and him, we have been part of this group, and I have the love for Africa, and I just want to contribute, with whichever small part which can, put this knowledge, these great ideas we have into the public so people can actually
So,
see
Dr.
them.
Anseria, just before I leave, because I have to do a teacher observation soon, I have a question. Have you ever worked or collaborated with any of the Rotary clubs in Washington, D.C.? Because sometimes they make small grants, and you also, that's how my project in Burundi started. We started with a $3,000 grant. And then we were able to do a multi-district grant with a district in Burundi and a district in Canada and my district in New York. So have you ever worked with the Rotary Network? I mean, it's 1.2 million people, and hundreds and hundreds of clubs.
No, I haven't. This is the first time I'm hearing it, and but during my college years here, we had for example, I went to University of Maryland. That's where I studied, and I know we had this program where with the university in Rwanda where we did especially in the health and the nursing professions, where we kind of partnered, and the university can give a little grant to the local university, and then they can bring up a program or nurture a program kind of mirror what we do around here. I haven't been part or come across the Rotary clubs in Washington. I would like to explore and see what they are. And there's so many avenues. If those avenues are available, and especially we can channel them towards the most deserving places, that would be a great idea.
Fantastic. So just as per the little chat, so one of the most beautiful things that we are witnessing happening within the Africa Voices dialogue community is these spontaneous connections and collaborations and opportunities to really spark thinking between each other. And so, as a baseline intent for everything that we do, our commitment is to hold the space for connection. So before we do the research project is one thing we are committed to doing as a project, but we try not to get overly invested in too many projects. What we really commit to is holding the space for connection so that people who find each other within the Africa Voices dialogue community can, can connect. So please feel free to chat to each other, connect up. We've seen a tremendous number of spontaneous collaborations emerging and evolving, and that brings huge joy. So if you find somebody that you like who said something that really interests you, connect up, find them again offline, or see if they are maybe part of one of the networks. So our networks have evolved in this way. It's collectives of people who really care about specific topics, and then start working on them autonomously under, a little bit of an Africa Voices dialogue banner that helps to hold and keep them and helps the ethos and intent and integrity of how they approach each other, but who really are able to explore areas that interest them without kind of feeling controlled by anything.
Yes, and Robin also, Timothy brought up a very important topic, considering that we are multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary actually, the health aspect. So Timothy, that is an area which you can start thinking about how you like it to take shape so that it can appear in this project. So we are looking forward to your guidance on that.
So absolutely.
Yes, and Robin, I see Kennedy Oulu, who is a M&E expert. I think he's joining us from Tanzania. Maybe he can say a word of hello and what his name, where he's connecting from, and also his expectation in crafting this book. and then after that, Roxana can follow. Kennedy?
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam alaikum.
Yeah, I'm so happy to join this conversation. It's a very interesting topic. Well, I'm Abdelaziz Al-Hamar. I'm a school improvement plan at the Regional Academy for Education and Training, FES Meknes. So I'm happy to join the Africa Voice Dialogue community. This topic it resonates a lot, especially in the African context and the Moroccan context either. So nowadays, as you know, in Morocco, it's we are in full time of reform of our education system, and one of the components of the educational reform that we are working on is the professional network. So the structure that we have nowadays is what we call the CPPs, the professional practices communities. It's a kind of professional network, but it's more focused on the management level. But actually we are working on another model, another structure, which is always focusing on the professional networks, which we are experimenting, which is the educational zone. So, and also we are working on the implementation of the facilitation mechanism that help or enable the emergence of ecosystems of learning communities, either at the pedagogical level or the management level and the school life and extracurricular activities. So the professional network is a very important topic. So in the African context and the Moroccan context, which really, so I'm so excited to see what the outcomes of this scientific endeavor on the professional learning communities. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to join you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Abdelaziz, and really, really exciting to hear about your work and beautiful fit. And particularly, you know, as you reflecting on this transition in thinking from, which is very much where we want to go with the book, transitioning our thinking from professional learning networks, which is still a very tight band and still very flat, to thinking about really what are communities of care and belonging that facilitate learning ecosystem evolution look like, because they are fundamentally, conceptually, there's some big differences there. And so we really are keen with this book to position Ubuntu as an informing philosophy for transitioning away from flat professional learning learning networks or communities of practice where the focus is on the outputs and on learning skills, as opposed to the kinds of spaces which we have experienced in part through our Africa Voices dialogue work, which is really spaces that are focused on connection, care, relationality, and trust, and where, because those conditions are well attended to, the consequences are that the people within them find themselves in a position where they learn so much more effectively, and that really is the foundation of creating learning ecosystem capability, is focusing on the conditions, not the outputs. So it sounds like a very exciting group of people to be working with, and we know that as we work, also we hope to attract additional inputs, and hopefully this will be the first of many things that we can do together. So welcome to Neil, Silvana, Abdelghani, and anybody else that has joined in the interim. Great to see you here. Gillian, welcome, Gillian. So let's I see another few people are arriving. I think we may have had, just to flag, I think we may have had our time changes kick in. I'm suspecting that time changes kicked in this week because we have had a couple of queries about what time are we actually starting. So for our next session, Aziz and Andrew, must better remember to double check the time changes. Okay, so
Robin,
yep.
I know that we will not be able to hear each individual who has just joined us, but we are going to have the breakout rooms. And I think that it's very interesting to just keep in mind that what has emerged so far is that there are some very, very interesting issues, yes, topics that not just topics that people have shared from the top of their minds, but they are evidence-based topics that can be included in the book. We would like to keep in mind that what we might do through this think tank, so we have already started the thinking, I think, even before we go into the rooms or we split into groups. So what we want to keep in mind is we just as we go along, we just keep in mind the people who share.
Dr. Andrew Wambua is the co-host now.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's from my own computer. So I said that's what we want to keep in mind of everyone here is to just like pay attention to whoever shares your own interests. And that probably would help us very quickly split into interest groups who can probably focus and work on similar issues.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So exactly. So you know, what we're really hoping to do is have a space that is genuinely exciting people wanting to contribute, and then have a loose enough structure. And I'll share kind of what we are thinking about in terms of the structure of what this book might look like, but have a loose enough, positively framed, positively focused structure that can allow for the inclusion of, you know, aligned thinking and ideas, and really co-crafting that so that we try and incorporate what everybody wants to bring, rather than setting a framework and then kind of selecting out only certain things. Let's think about what does everybody have on their heart, what's ignited for them, what is something that you're passionate about, and then how do we incorporate that into a book that has a structure for inclusion. And so I will just share again here. And as Aziz said, first of many conversations, and also, you know, let's keep our ears and eyes attuned. Everybody can take notes. We'll create a platform for us to just dump into. We may need a little support in doing that. And we're going to be kind and patient with each other, and we'll definitely get there, because what we have in the room is incredible heart, a huge amount of passion, tremendous capability, lots of intelligence, lots of ideas, lots of experience and exposure. And really the task that falls to us is coordinating and organizing that. And that I'm pretty certain that we will be able to do, particularly with so much skill in the room. Okay, so just back quickly. So really what the proposal is going to ask for is interdisciplinarity, which I think from this discussion, clearly we have. Impact, being able to committed to helping, they ask for scholars. I think we need to extend it much more broadly than that. We really want to be informing people on the ground, practitioners on the continent, practitioners beyond the continent, researchers, scholars, policymakers. We really want to create something that's tangible, visible, and connectable into real life, and interesting and fun to read. The SDG alignment, so we were not going to have any challenge with that. And then I think that if we do this the way we hope to do it, I can't see how it wouldn't create some kind of compelling desire to be read. Okay, so where are we so far? So, you know, whenever one develops this type of proposal, you need to cycle through. So the co-creation process is very much kind of keeping keeping a structure that helps us move without overly controlling it, but also having this porosity that really invites fresh thinking and ideas in. And so just to share with you, so obviously where we are is we've had the request to write a proposal. So we have the proposal document, which we are wanting to populate. We don't want to populate it before we have as many ideas coming in as is possible. And so what we've done is we've kind of set up a little bit of a main editorial, like when I say editorial team, like a guiding team to help us with the process, to help us keep things quite tight. We are very, what we are really wanting to do is sort of have this overarching project management editorial team. And then what we are going to invite is, as we start seeing the subsections of this book formulate and crystallize and coalesce, we would love to invite our broader community where you have a huge interest and where you have the kind of skill that might be able to coordinate that subsection and do some of the sub-editorial work. If you're keen, let us know, because we'd like to create roles that suit everybody's interests and capacity. So that is an invitation. We've created done a little bit of a think tank based on the past conversations we've had as the research network, where we've really started to gather what are people interested in, what are the hot topics, what are the things that are coming up over and over again. And we've actually got about probably 10 big topics, more even, but at least 10 big topics that are recurring themes and that people are interested in. And so what we've tried to do is to think about how could we create a manageable structure that could contain all of those, and could have a rhythm to it that allows us to see all of what's available to be seen. As we said, we've started to work on some of the technical aspects. There's quite a lot of technical work that has to go into the proposal, and I think that's good to do as a small team, because we hope to get it back to them by next week, the initial proposal. But we will really start working on it once we've got as much input from this session as possible. And then we have established a little bit of a supportive team, and also what we are hoping to is to grow that supportive team. So as we start to develop collectives that are coalescing around ideas, that we become quite intentional about how do those collectives support each other in thinking together, in what they're writing, in proofreading, inspiring each other, etc. So maybe just to mention, so in this kind of project management team currently, Andrew, Aziz, and I are obviously playing a role. Ruxana Rajab, who you heard a little bit earlier, is really helpful, also in terms of, I think, process and rigorous lens on the research aspect. Sue Duval has got enormous experience in project management and also writing, so crafting books and publications. And then Marianne Clegg, who you'll see on the screen, is a brilliant copy editor and copywriter, so a copy editor. So she will really, I think, help us with just language as we get closer towards the end stages. So just ensuring that the language fits together well, reads beautifully. Jasmine, as you said, this ability to bring in context and our own language. How do we do that? And then Jill, who's not on the call today, is also really brilliant from a writing perspective and from a writing support. So support in terms of thinking about how we might set up writing groups, perhaps, or how do we go around that process? So we have a little bit, just for the sake of developing the technical proposal, what we have a little bit of a kind of potential for what we would like to pitch. which is that we, as we discussed Abdulaziz a little bit earlier, really transitioning from the concept of professional learning networks to how do we really realize the full potential of networks and of communities of care and belonging, and with an African lens, bringing a uniquely African perspective on the role, importance of an approach to professional learning networks in their optimal sort of form. So if anybody has any ideas or any thoughts about how that might want to be modulated, please pop them in the chat. It's not a fixed final. It's just for the sake of the technical proposal, we'll need to have something. And the reason we've kept the professional learning networks in there is because we really want to reference one of their criteria, which is that it is a professional learning network series. But we want to push a little bit against that, or not against it, but in development of the concept. Just again, what we are hoping in terms of approach is to really frame everything that's written and the way that we work together on this within a frame of inclusion, inclusive education, belonging, connection, care, collaboration, and to not write about this work, but to actually practice that approach as we are developing the book, so that we're both writing about it, but what we are writing about, we are simultaneously experiencing and being able to speak to in the way that the book feels when it's read and received. We thought that a way to manage might be to create, sort of segment the book into some big topics, and then have chapter titles within those in which we can bring through a lot of different voices and a lot of different perspectives. So we will speak to that a little bit more just now. Roxana, you might want to talk to that a little bit, just giving you a heads up. Really practicing collaborative research approaches and co-creative writing methodologies. So being the way that we are promoting. Practicing multi-stakeholder inclusion at lots of different levels. So both the data collection, the contribution, findings, voice, how we're developing insights. Developing collectives across capabilities and research experience to foster engagement, co-facilitated learning, mentorship, reverse mentorship, and really clustering people with very different lived experiences in a way that facilitates tremendous growth. And then to have a community-orientated, academic, ethnographic. We don't really like the word ethnographic, but what it describes is basically embedded research. So research coming from the spaces that are being written about, and multimodal research approaches. Okay. All right. What we are asking for, both today and going forward, and what I think we've already been discussing a little bit, is really thinking about developing the themes. So how do we develop these themes? Inviting, so who is interested in what topics? What would you like to contribute? What would you like to bring? What are the collaborative research and opportunities that you see? And if you are keen, we're in. So as soon as you say you're in, you're in. And we'll look forward to working together with you. And then maybe not immediately now, but progressively over time, thinking about how we establish writing groups. So how do we moderate this process well? And then really help with looking for phenomenal case studies. So Jasmine, as you say, like using Burundi as a case study of tech in education. What is the African perspective? Looking for voices. So when you hear people, you have an interesting story, you have looking for their voice and being able to capture them and put them into the book, unmodulated, unfiltered, art, poetry, really making this a multi-sensory type of experience as much as is possible. Okay, so perhaps if there are any questions or anything that we want to clarify, maybe let me go into the next slide, and then we'll come back to the sort of questions and clarifications. I think it'll be helpful for us to just look at what the current straw man looks like. It's not set in stone. So if, for instance, we feel there isn't a chapter into which the climate issue could actually fit, but let's share with you what we're thinking. So our initial thoughts on the design are to divide into 5 or 6 broad segments. What we've brainstormed a little around, and as I said, there's space and scope for shifting some of this, is to think about change and transformation in education systems in Africa, Ubuntu community and reclaiming African heritage, African education heritage and the learning ecosystem piece. So Kennedy, from that perspective, you know, really bringing community, so parental empowerment, engagement, having a chapter on something like that, being able to bring the learning ecosystem piece. What does African learning ecosystem look like? Personally, I believe Africa has a huge amount to contribute to the global conversation on learning ecosystems. You know, unpacking a little bit around the philosophy of Ubuntu. Then we thought perhaps about a chapter on knowledge building for African education, technology in education. So when you were speaking, Jasmine, I just immediately, what a beautiful case study to bring, you know, what does technology in education mean in the African context? What is the Afrocentric appreciation of what role tech can play? And then prosperity in a thriving African continent. And this really is also the sustainability piece that we were thinking about here. So being able to reframe the deficit concept to move towards prosperity in a thriving African continent in terms of some of the compelling issues of the moment around climate change, sustainability, food security, etc. How do we frame that, and how do we start to speak to what does that mean in Africa, and what are we seeing emerging? And then throughout the book, to really carry these cross-cutting threads of Ubuntu and inclusion. And that speaks to this concept of communities of care and belonging. And to intersperse with a lot of things that are real voices coming from real people, artworks from our Heritage and Equity Network, from children, poetry, voices, song, etc. Sure. Okay, I'm going to finish the slide and then I'm going to stop talking for a very long time. And then, you know, also just in terms of thinking about what kinds of chapters we might want to have in each segment, you know, perhaps in a little bit of an initial, what is the philosophy behind this segment? What is the context of this chapter in relation to the world, Africa and the world? Then a chapter which could be quite thick, which might be like a couple of different best practices that we're seeing on the continent relating to these various areas. And then another chapter which could be quite big, which could be case studies. So, you know, case studies on, let's say, the tech education. So Burundi, there are tons, you know, Kenya has a whole lot around tech and education. Every country will have a perspective. So just gathering a couple of those, bringing in some real voices from the ground, and then really looking at this topic through the lens of what is its potential for transformative change for Africa. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. And maybe we can just go into a little bit more of an open discussion. Yeah, anything that triggers for you, anything that is a glaring absence for you, anything that excites and inspires you, and you kind of think, I want to contribute to that. And while we're waiting for people, just to say hi to Silvana, Neil, Budenayo, anybody else that's joined. Sorry, Aziz, carry on.
Yeah. So I as well extend my greetings to everyone who has joined us. Just to clarify one thing, the what we have just shared with you is tentative, and if you think that you have some interest that may not fit within some of the segments or the sections, so we're still open to add in more sections or add in more segments. And as we said at the beginning, this is a think tank, so it's a thinking process, and it's an unusual process, of course, because generally speaking, what people do is that they craft the proposal and they write it down and they just invite people to send chapters, and that's the way we have been doing it so far. So this is not our first meeting. We have already met with our partners before, and our meeting today is with at the grassroots level with everyone who is family, an AVD family member, and we wanted to do it as a co-creation, as Robin said before. You're welcome to share any suggestion you may see fits within the book, even if it's not probably part of what Robin had just shared in the slide.
Silvana.
Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to see you and to be part of this great initiative. One of the thoughts I have to kind of put a unique perspective on the chapters or the book is to entitle them with African words, beginning with Nia and Ubuntu and any other words that are very powerful in the African language throughout the continent. And so rather than like the titles that you have obviously are very clear and say what it is, but just to put a different spin on it, and then you could be bringing in many other perspectives under that word.
Love that, Silvana. Sorry, Aziz. I love that, and I think it also fits so beautifully because it's a segue into the philosophy. You know, to be able to land a word and then invite people into what does that mean, and what does it mean for this continent, and why do we feel it has importance in this book?
Yeah, because the words are very powerful.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. Actually, what I've been thinking as well, I've been thinking around this just right now, Silvana, is that as Ubuntu might be the most known in Africa, the most known theory when it comes to community, building communities and working together. But there are, of course, other theories and other concepts that are also worth sharing. So I once did research and found out that there are many other theories and concepts and frameworks, philosophical frameworks that have been used in Africa. So part of the cultural heritage. And it's very interesting, not just for us at the level of the work, the book proposal, but it's interesting for all the authors who are willing to contribute when they are thinking of their topics, to think about what are some of the concepts that are grounded in the African heritage and that might serve as strong concepts or strong words to use for the title. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah,
for instance,
well,
South Africa.
Yeah.
Yes, for instance, in South Africa, you have Ubuntu. In Morocco, you have Twizy, that very, very few people know about, which is also grounded in the Amazigh heritage in Morocco. And I'm sure that in other places there are other concepts that we can share in the book. And that might be one of the things that might make this book very, very special. Okay?
And then in Amazigh, it's also the word afus rofus, meaning hand-in-hand learning, right? So there's many words that just fit in.
Stunning idea. Marianne, I saw you had your hand up.
Yes,
and yay, Haruna. Good to see Haruna.
I just wanted to say that I really like that idea with the words, because I think that it's so tempting to, you know, things can get quite, you know, we get excited about our philosophies and get excited about ideas, and it can get quite dry and verbose, and you actually want to hook the reader. You want to and the readers want to connect emotionally to the philosophy. So I think that's a stunning idea, to get those words, and then to and perhaps use subtitles under the words with some, the more serious academic stuff, kind of slotted in, but to kind of, I just think we've always got to keep the reader in mind. And I think that the same thing applies to using illustrations and the use of illustrations to hook the reader so that they're not lost after page one.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Looking in, I've been paying very close attention, and because I'm not in Africa, but I'm in a place that's very rural and it's got strong community links, and also being an educator, education is changing so fundamentally, but I'm not sure that the systems of education are. In other words, they've still got these notions of transmission and learnification, whereby everything's got to be targetized. So that what Robin and all of you people are talking about is creating belonging and well-being in community. And as I've been struggling with this and ran a very successful project in Scotland that was exactly on these lines, but it got really sideswept by the learnification, performativity, targetization ethos. So what I'm thinking about is this not really more about the changing nature between education and community and society and government as we now hit the quarter century mark nearly of the 21st century? Is it about this huge shift such that you're obviously got the whole Africa project, but it's really about how we're changing, and also the communications revolution, the very fact that I'm here in the very far north of Scotland on the Cromarty Firth, and you can just see it behind me now in the very far north of Scotland. It's not saying that how we're contending with this enormous shift, and yet also there's catastrophes occurring, Gaza, Ukraine, and what have you. And also, I just want to add one final point. I had very close work with Northern Ireland in my school, with another school there, and just how that community has contended with ethnic conflict. So is it how we're changing in this century? Is this what really the whole project's about? Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Yeah, I agreed. I think what Abdulaziz was talking about a little earlier. So in thinking about global transformation of education, what does Africa have to offer? And I think there is a tremendous amount that the continent has to offer in terms of what are the conditions for humanized and humanizing learning spaces, for learning ecosystem development. Yeah, so thank you.
So maybe we hear from Sue.
Yes, hi everybody. Sorry that I came in late. I think what's been coming through is very powerful, and I can see this book starting to emerge before my eyes, and so it becomes a reality when you kind of see it and can see the picture. And I think in terms of the series of books and the depth of content, it's only when you start gathering it in that it will emerge how much we've got. And so I would suggest that we start gathering it in, and then whether there's 3 or 2 or what we start with will emerge. So I think that's the way I would do it. Yes, great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. That's divine. All right. So yeah, so perhaps just what we can do is just have a look through kind of the concepts of the sections. I think we might want to think about, so these are not, as you said earlier, they're not set in stone, and we have scope to maybe add a couple of sections. But I think, keeping that Yamina's comment and there is a profuse amount that we can talk about. So keeping that in context. So how do we touch on all of the topics that we really believe are critical to touch on, but through this lens of inclusion, connection, community, care and belonging, that running as a golden thread, and then create the space for further exploration particularly when we start to see there is just a ton of material coming through about a particular, or there's a lot of energy developing around a particular theme. So just to share with us, those that are able to sort of fit around and also stay for a bit, just to share what are some of from our previous sessions, from what we've envisaged a little bit around the straw man design. What are some of the areas that we've discussed, and we already know there's a lot of energy around, and can we pitch another one or two that are critical? So do we want to separate out, for instance, conflict management and conflict sensitivity in education? It is such a huge thing for the continent, and maybe really relevant when we are talking, about these opposing forces of community, connection, care, and belonging, and conflict and exclusion. Might be an important thing to include as a section area. And then the other thing is, the climate and sustainability and those issues. Do we feel comfortable that they could fit in under a forward-focused prosperity heading, or do we feel that they actually need a space of their own? So those are the two that are springing to mind. Yeah, so just a quick kind of, this is from what we've discussed in previous sessions. Some of the brainstorming that's gone into the where people are interested in researching and bringing their thinking. So the first is on Ubuntu, community, and reclaiming African education heritage, and learning ecosystems, the relevance to the learning ecosystem paradigm. So quite a big group that was really keen to explore that. I won't go into detail on all of the different topics that came up there. Then looking at change and transformation in education systems in Africa. What does that mean? What does change and transformation mean for African education systems? And I think it has relevance beyond Africa, but to cite it in Africa. There's a lot of interest in this room around technology and education and the African lens. So we definitely have a lot of people, I think, that will be bringing into that. And then the two things that we kind of felt might be good spaces, but we can move them, is thinking about knowledge building for African education. So Ruxana, I don't know if Ruxana had to jump off, but I know Ruxana really had some interesting ideas on this concept of knowledge building. So how do we build knowledge, and how do we, I think it ties in very much, Udanayo, with what you were saying. What does quality education mean for education in an African context and in a very local African context? So that has a nice tie over. And then prosperity in a thriving African continent, which kind of initially we had thought a lot of the sustainability things and youth demographic as well. So things around like, what are Africa's assets? How do we nurture and take care of our assets? How do we address some of the major threats that we are encountering by climate change and climate mitigation and climate sensitivity? So those were the 5 sort of catch-alls. If anybody has an idea for another segment that they feel belongs in, let's pop it in there. And again, we'll probably propose these because we have to get the technical proposal in quite soon, but that doesn't mean they're fixed in stone. So, we can flex later. And if we see that things are emerging that need to be titled differently, then we just move with that. Yeah. So we've had a lot of discussion on that so far. What I wanted to just ask is, we don't have a lot, we've only got 10 minutes left, but what I wanted to ask is, if you are able to get into the Jamboard, and I'll pull it up just now, we've got a Jamboard with these different areas. I have captured, and we also have the recording of what everybody has shared so far. If you have something that you're really keen to write on, put it in the chat as well. so that we have a lot of data that we can start to sift through and aggregate and create the collectives around. But there is, if you are able to jump on,